Hey guys, this video is going to be on alien abductions, like I said. And when I do these videos about aliens and stuff, I have a very rudimentary knowledge of aliens and all that. So that's kind of who these videos are made for, people who are just interested in the topic. I don't dive too deep into aliens because I know you can get into some pretty weird stuff eventually. So that's just to get that out of the way. Anyways, as they say around where I live, you can pop a squat, pull up a stump, and we'll get into some alien abduction stories. Thank you for watching. Sometimes when one considers the possibility of someone having been abducted by aliens, you notice one of the most overlapping factors of all. The person often experiences missing time. What feels like a blink is actually hours, days, or in sometimes weeks. This is what makes me wonder about the nature of these beings. Are they indeed from outer space, or are they from another dimension? Perhaps travelers from another dimension that intersects with our own. A very different world where these beings evolved to be vaguely similar, yet entirely different from our own people. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like it would add to the cases of missing time. They may attempt to put the abductee back in the same time and place, but possibly settle for, quotes, close enough. And what the end result is the person being severely disoriented, missing time, and sometimes belongings. Is it possible that these beings are not as advanced as we think they are, but instead are just ahead of us in technology and have not yet perfected time travel or interdimensional travel at that? There's also many cases after people are abducted, they experience poltergeist-like activity for a period of time afterwards. This is another thing that makes me wonder if interdimensional travel rather than space travel is at play. Then again, perhaps it is both at play and they are from another universe and are using black holes from their universe to ours. For those who read comics like I do, it puts me in mind to the boom tubes used in the DC Comics universe. Anyways, enough of my thoughts. Let's dive into these strange abduction stories. So speaking of cases of missing time, I found a case from October 1st, 1966. A 19-year-old first-class airman, Robert Matthews, arrived at a bus stop in Cape Cod Village, North Truro, Massachusetts. It was 8:45 a.m., and he was ready to be picked up and ride off to his very first tour with the U.S. Air Force at a nearby base. So as you can imagine, he'd be extremely nervous, being 19, joining the military. You wouldn't know anybody, and all this other stuff, all these other emotions are at play here. So when he gets to the station, he notices that there's no one there to pick him up. In fact, the place looks abandoned and deserted. He called the base from a phone booth and they told him that a truck was already on the way to get him, and that he should just stay put and wait there, as it would only take a few minutes for them to come and get him. It seemed normal enough at first, but from there things would get quite strange and bizarre indeed, unfolding into a weird case of missing time and a possible alien abduction. As our guy, Robert, is waiting there for the truck, he noticed, quote, strange lights moving from right to left across the sky, and he felt this irrational fear begin to spread through him and this unmistakable feeling of dread. While the lights were certainly odd, he wasn't sure what this sudden pang of overbearing dread and anxiety was coming from. And in a slight panic, he called the base back and asked how long it would be before the truck arrived. And when he called, the base personnel was quite confused by this, and he informed Matthews that his truck had already been there to pick him up and he wasn't there. Matthews insisted that he had been standing there the whole time and had not left the phone booth, but he had seen no truck either. And it was at that moment when he realized with a pang of panic that it was now 9:45 a.m., which didn't make any sense as he had just called the base for the first time 5 minutes ago. Or so he thought. Now when Matthews eventually did get to the base, he was extensively questioned on where he had been when the truck arrived to pick him up the first time, but he honestly had no idea. In his mind, and in his firm belief, he had been standing there for only 5 minutes. He saw the lights, and then had called the base again to ask where the truck was. He was not aware at all that a full hour had passed between those calls, and he was sure that he had not left the designated pickup spot. Now, officials at the base obviously didn't believe him, thinking that he was drunk or just making up a story to kind of account for his lateness. But Matthew stuck to his story over the years, and it was just sort of forgotten about after a while. He went to work at the base, and he would later serve in Vietnam. But through the years, that strange incident obviously gnawed away at the back of his mind. Over the years, he didn't discount it, but instead became more steadfast in his belief that his bizarre bout of missing time had some connection to the lights he had seen, and he had some vague fragments in his mind of strange faces in a medical room, but he couldn't quite figure out exactly what had happened. Years later, he would by pure chance come across a book by notable ufologist Bud Hopkins, and he would have sort of an epiphany, which was, as he said, "I was on vacation looking for something to read, and on the shelf in front of me I saw this book with this creature on it. I read the book and I thought someone had stepped into my head and taken my innermost fears and put them in this book. It brought me to tears. I couldn't believe that it was actually happening to someone else." So he contacted the author of this book pretty much immediately, and after several interviews, the ufologist became convinced that he was actually experiencing a bit of missing time from an alien abduction. But anyways, after Hopkins became convinced, he said, "It is not perceived as a break in which something happens, and then a resumption. It is remembered as continuous, and the half-hour trip turns out to be a 2-hour trip or whatever, and this is sometimes experienced in conjunction with a UFO sighting or something like a light, but not always." Now, this author has written 2 books on missing time called Intruders and Missing Time, and there's obviously organized support groups so people can compare their stories and tell their stories and just have some kind of solidarity with other people who have experienced something in the same light they have. And as for Robert, this wasn't the only encounter that he had in his life. When he was about 5 or 6 years old, he says he saw a green glowing figure in his bedroom, and when he tried to scream but nothing came out, and he thought that he lost his voice and hearing, then all of a sudden the figure came towards him, lifted up his pajamas, and then did something to his chest. But when he told his mother, she obviously didn't believe him. More importantly, what do you think about the case? Do you think that all this really happened to Robert? Or do you think that it could be like an embellishment and something else happened? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And now we'll get into the next part, probably after this little ad break here. So I got this encounter from a web archive of a website that seems to be dead or something. Anyways, the person's name that experienced this isn't given, but it was posted by MUFON Tennessee or investigated by them. So we'll get into it from there. The encounter is reported as having taken place on Saturday, October 2nd at 5:30 a.m. in Bristol, Tennessee. The witness stated he was driving home that morning when he saw at a distance what appeared to be fire on a ridgetop. As he drove, he spotted the quotes "fire" several other times through the trees, and it appeared to be moving. He stopped at an intersection and exited his car. He began hearing a deep throbbing hum, and the craft emerged from the tree line, moving directly toward him. He started to run, but realized there was nowhere to run. So he stood still as the craft, estimated to be some 300 feet in length, moved over him. He noted that the brilliant reddish-orange domes, which seemed to be filled with a violent, turbulent fire, illuminating the bottom. He also noted equally spaced rib-like structures running the width of the craft, which appeared to be somewhat reflective and metallic. As it crossed him, he stated that he felt his skin burning, tingling, and the sound seemed to penetrate his body. His hair was standing on end. The giant object passed over him and made a westward turn without banging and moved behind the trees. The following day, the witness reported the sighting. At this time, his back and face was burning, and he had awakened that morning with a nosebleed and a metallic taste in his mouth. He also noted that he brushed his hair and strands of it were coming out, unlike ever before. The witness was weak, lethargic, and was filled with fear over the events of the previous day. It was also noted that a loss of time, 15 minutes on his watch, which he had never lost time before or since then. A follow-up interview by the person who reported this, or wrote it, I guess, has found that the witness has been somewhat improving, as in like they're beginning to feel better. They don't feel like the burning or pain anymore and all that stuff. The witness was said to be very sincere about this, and that there was no doubt that the incident took place, or that at least he thought that it took place. So I don't know about anybody else, but the violent fire that he had mentioned, and like the burning of his skin, that kind of sounds like to me like it's radiation, like a reactor of some sort. And you'd probably need a very powerful engine to like get a 300-foot long craft that high above them and like keep it kind of in air and be able to hover and stuff. Now, the missing time and the nosebleed and metallic taste and like hair loss is something that I've heard of before, especially when they're abducted and don't know it. It's probably like the taste of like whatever they put in his mouth or whatever they did to him, kind of thing. It seems that a lot of times that they don't really hurt the person. They just kind of examine them and like take like readings and stuff, and then they might put like a probe in them and like a circular thing and then just take off again. I've heard quite a bit of that in like cases that I read over the years. I'm just kind of feel like I'm having a discussion right now, so I want to know what you think. Let me know what you think happened in that case in the comments below. Now, this story is from July of 1996, and it's on the Yukon Territory here in Canada. This was along the Yukon gold fields and the Indian River, and this is the experience of two twin sisters, Sue and Sarah. They were traveling on the Hunker Road, driving up a steep hill towards King Solomon Dome, a beautiful spot where one can see for miles from the divide between the Klondike and the Indian Rivers. And this is above the tree line, so the views aren't obstructed by anything. So as they're nearing the summit, suddenly over the ridge to their left and ahead of them in the sky, they spotted a strange sight indeed. They could not believe their eyes. Suspended in the sky was a giant cigar-shaped something. It had a row of rectangular windows and was sitting there motionless and kind of at a slight angle. Sue looked at her watch and recalls the time being 1:50 a.m. However, she noted that her watch had stopped. Their urgency now to get home had been considerably reinforced, and they were only about 30 minutes away as well, and they went over a flat summit that followed the ridgeline to the west. And it was later on that they noticed that they don't recall seeing where the UFO was anymore. Perhaps it was obscured by the ridgeline to the south. Perhaps it was behind them, or maybe simply they just, quotes, don't remember. They do recall traveling down the quartz road to the south to start their descent into the Indian River Valley. They could see much more detail in the craft now, and it was almost directly ahead of them. They noticed that there was a small swarm of small ships buzzing around what they gathered to be the front of the object that were not there previously. The front, they assumed, was the end, slightly tilted towards the sky. These small ships appeared as bright, hazy lights, 12 to 13 in number, as they did attempt to count them, and they were going in and out of the big cigar-shaped thing. Their thought was, we have to get home. Perhaps they could get Sue's son to verify the unbelievable sight they were witnessing at this point. They drove down the steep descent along the quartz road and into the valley and lost sight of the objects from behind a hill, which was on the east side of Quartz Creek, When they got farther down, the creek valley opened up and they saw the object again, but the, quote, little ships were now gone. Apparently they had somehow tucked themselves away, but they couldn't believe how close this thing appeared to be. It was ahead of them and appeared to be suspended right over their gold claim, only about 3 kilometers away. They were not far from home now and were able to travel more quickly to the bottom of Quartz Creek Road. They passed a placer mining operation on their right side, with the workers outside seeming oblivious to the UFO. They thought about pulling in and alerting the work crew, but the draw to Sue's sun was much greater, obviously. As they kept traveling, they were astounded to see this thing started to go behind a haystack mountain, which was 12 kilometers away from them on the other side of the Indian River. With the mountain in front of it now, the realization of the enormity of the object was almost unbelievable. Up to now, they thought it was over the Indian River at the farthest, but now they realized that it was much more distant. This thing was huge. Its angle of tilt was also increased as it continued to descend behind the haystack mountain. They were expecting it to shoot off into the sky any second now, up and to the left. As they perceived to be the front of the craft, to their astonishment, this thing continued to just descend at the same angle behind the haystack mountain, almost as if it was going underground. Kind of makes you think there. When they reached a point that was less than a minute from their home, they were frustrated to see the last remaining portion of the quote, mothership descend behind the haystack mountain. How could this thing fit behind a haystack unless it went into the dirt, was their thought. They came roaring into their driveway, honking their horn. The sun came running out. The sisters jumped out of the car and tried to look for words to describe the awesome event they had just witnessed. They were beside themselves. The son managed to get in a few words edgewise. "Where have you been? It's 3:30 in the morning," he said. Apparently the sisters were missing 2 hours from their journey. As they slowly unloaded their vehicle, they continued to watch Haystack Mountain for a good 20 minutes to a half hour just to see if anything else was going to happen, and obviously nothing did. The next day they visited the placer operation that they passed during their sighting and spoke with the cook. She had not heard anybody in the camp speak about seeing anything unusual at breakfast. Surely the sister thought that it would have been the subject of a lively discussion around the breakfast table. The cook was skeptical of the sisters, so she immediately separated them and had them each draw what they had seen. She was flabbergasted to see that their drawings matched. Although these original drawings are no longer available, this person subsequently interviewed and confirmed the fact that the drawings were similar. The drawings were much the same as the ones depicted in the picture. I'll try to put the picture, if I can save it, in the video here. So yeah, that's a pretty crazy experience right there. If the sisters did indeed see that, then that's pretty wild how it seemed to just kind of go into the ground behind the mountain. But what do you think happened? Do you think that they did see something? Do you think that they made it up? Do you think that maybe they did see something, but in the moment they kind of embellished it? Let me know what you think. And if you like this, I guess shorter video, I think it is, then please like and subscribe. If you like me enough and like my voice enough, then consider donating to my Patreon. I have a PayPal as well. And I hope the video found you well. I hope that you enjoyed the stories. And I'll catch you again next time. See you later.